TV and radio, and with a new team in the NBA with Michael Jordan. Like, you're thinking about staying doing what you're doing? I said, well, yeah. And he goes, well, you've got to get into television. Television is where it's headed. And this is 1989. Right. Television is where it's at. You've got to get in TV. So I took the job, and they were adamant. They both said, this is something you have got to do for your career. And so we did. And so with the baby, Annie and I went up there and stayed for a year. And she's from Oklahoma and Texas, and there was snow on the ground in mid-May in Minneapolis. And She said, "I don't know that I can do it." And I said, "I get it." She's also pregnant with our next girl, our next daughter. So anyway, I went to the Timberwolves and said, "I love the job, but I've got to move my family back. And if you need to go another direction, I understand." They said, "No, if you can figure it out, we'll figure it out, and we want to keep you." So I got to move back to Kansas City after being up there for about 11 months. And would commute every day to Minneapolis from that point on for the next 8 years. Would fly up in the morning, do the game that night, fly back the next day, the next morning early. And if they had a homestand of 5 games, I did that boom, boom, boom. Every other day I was flying. Every day I was flying, basically. And it was, but it was fine. It was no different than somebody commuting in a bigger city when they're in traffic for an hour and a half to get to work and an hour and a half to get home. So it really did not seem that bad. I was a younger guy at the time, and it wasn't that bad, but we made it work. And Timberwolves are great, and that got me into TNT and other things. So, but again, I could continue to do the Chiefs, which was really great. I could do the Timberwolves and do the Chiefs. I could still be the radio voice of the Chiefs, and I liked that. That was. I thought I really liked that time in my career.
So that was the turning point towards doing network, as you mentioned, with TNT and eventually getting into the NFL. So that would mean eventually your time with the Chiefs would end. Talk about that transition.
Well, that was a tough one because I love the Chiefs and they were so much a part of our family, and we really, as a family, loved Red Friday and going to the games. Ann would take the girls to the games and come to the booth at halftime and see Griggs and see Len, and it really felt part of the family. And they were beginning to win. They had Carl Peterson and Marty Schottenheimer, and that was they turned the team around. DeBerg was quarterbacking. I mean, it was Montana came, Marcus Allen. I mean, it was big time. So we really enjoyed it, Danny. It was great, but Fox had just gotten the NFL rights from CBS, and they were going to start broadcasting NFL Network games in the '94 season. So this was the end of '93. And Carl Peterson and the Chiefs and Marty Schottenheimer are in Buffalo for the AFC Championship game. And I've just finished doing Marty Schottenheimer's radio show for the pregame. And I'm walking across the field, and it was a cold day. And here, I got across midfield to go up the stands and get to our press box booth in Buffalo. And here comes Carl Peterson in his black leather jacket, a black leather sport, this big trench coat. He looked like he was so ominous because it was such an impressive coat. I remember thinking, wow, that's a good looking coat. I hope someday I can afford a coat like that. And Steve Sable, who ran NFL Films, and Carl had this big smile on his face as we were growing closer. He was walking to the same direction I was as he was leaving the booth, and I was going to the stands and up to the booth. And he said, "I was just telling Steve about you." And Steve then told me this story. "Steve, tell him what you were just telling me." Steve says, "Well, Fox called me the other day and said, give us the top, in your opinion, the top 3 radio broadcasters in the NFL." And he said, "Your name was one of the 3 I gave him." And I said, "You've got to be kidding me." And Carl said, "I told him not to do this because I don't want to lose you." And Carl was great, as he always has been to our family. But Steve Sable was the one that got me on Fox's radar, and then that spring they started hiring the broadcasters, and they got Summerall and they got Dick Stockton from CBS, but they had to fill out the roster, and so their whole approach was let's get 4 young broadcasters to fill it in to build our future. And the 4 they selected were Joe Buck and Kenny Albert and Tom Brenneman and me. Right. And so I had to make the difficult decision to leave the Chiefs after 9 years. And it was hard. It was very, very difficult. First call I got was from Marty Schottenheimer when it was announced. And then Lamar called, And then, Carl clearly was involved in the process, and that was a tough time. I was excited, but leaving, when you leave a family, it's always tough. And I was leaving a family with the Chiefs that I, to this day, consider part of our family still. All those people, some with us and some not. Lamar Hunt gave me my first job in the NFL. Carl Peterson, when he took over, they wiped the slate clean. Carl Peterson said, we're going to clean house and we're going to start from scratch, and we're going to get focus groups, and every thing about this organization is going to be looked at. So he had all these focus groups, and they talked about concessions, and they talked about parking, and they talked about in-stadium experience, and they talked about this and that, everything else, and they talked about the radio crew. What do you want to do with our broadcasts? And he said, of all the things that we did, excuse me, of all the things that we did and looked at, he said, the one thing people said, do not mess with the radio crew. And it was because of Len Dawson, and people love Grigsby. So Bill Grigsby. Right. So I luckily was kind of in that wave and just rode that wave with those other established guys. But they kept us. And Carl, that was the one thing with the organization they kept, was the broadcast crew. So I owe Carl a lot. And anyway, so we were able to continue on until the Fox offer came, and then Fox, I did that concurrently with my ESPN work on Saturdays. And then, of course, all that led to CBS, where I've been for 25 years.
That is probably the part that everybody is familiar with, so we don't have to really dive into that much. But from this point forward, weren't most of the things you would be weighing as far as your career is concerned is maybe what not to do rather than what to do?
Yeah, I had an offer to do the Chicago Bulls on TV right at the in early 91. They offered me their TV job, and that was tough. But I'd have to move to Chicago. I couldn't do the Chiefs anymore, and that didn't interest me because I didn't think leaving the NFL was the right thing to do, and I didn't do it. But I had a chance to go do Michael Jordan on TV, which would have been pretty fun.
Right.
I had a chance to do a couple other NFL teams. I know the Cowboys were looking at one time when Brad Sham had left, but that was just a blip in time because they changed stations. And the Houston Oilers had offered me, or the Vikings had offered me a job. There were chances along the way. I had a chance to go to a couple other networks. ESPN tried to make things better for me with more work, and that was a thought. But I don't know that I would really change a whole lot from what I'm doing right now, and what decisions we made. I thought about them, prayed about them, and as it turned out, every decision we've made, luckily, has been really positive and has worked out. But there were some opportunities along the way, and I've been very lucky that those things have continued to come. But I'm very, very happy that I've been able to stay. One of the things that, as you know, in this business, Danny, that you are always constantly trying to do is have, put some roots in, place yourself in a position where it's not just, a couple years and you're moving on to something else. And that is the one thing that I've enjoyed about when I look back at my career. I was 9 years with the Timberwolves. I was 9 years with the Chiefs. I've been at CBS for 25, 26 years. I've been with Turner since 1996 doing NBA for TNT. And those are all things that I'm really, the longevity, I think, sometimes is almost more important than anything else. And I've been very lucky in that.
You have indeed, and one of the things you still do, obviously, is some work for Westwood One on the radio. And how much does that sort of scratch an itch for you? Obviously, you mentioned TV was where it was at that time, and you have spent the bulk of your career doing television, but you still do get to do some radio. How do you sort of mix, match, enjoy when you get to do that?
I love the radio. I'm on 610. I'm on 810 every week for 10 months. So I get to visit with Seren, and before that, Kevin Keatsman. And I loved my time with Keats and loving my time with Seren right now. But doing the Monday night radio, and that is what I think keeps me going, quite frankly. The TV is challenging. But radio play-by-play, and you've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of games yourself, so you know what I'm talking about. Doing radio play-by-play is taxing. It's physically taxing because usually a lot of times you're moving around. Your body is kind of trying to reflect the play, and you stand up, you sit down, you're moving, you're singing, you're trying to maybe even feel what's going on the court or on the field, and that is all so much fun. Coming up with the right words, being a reporter, finding your voice, locking into your speed that you need to go at in that broadcast. All those things are just, so great, but I think they help me doing TV, and then the TV stuff helps me doing the radio. But my Monday night radio thing, as long as they'll have me, I'd like to keep doing that. That is the most challenging, but the most rewarding, and I really love that. And getting to do the Super Bowl every year is just such an honor. And I think of all the people that have sat in that seat and worn that headset and been in that position to broadcast those games, and that it never leaves me. Just how lucky I am to be in that role, doing the Monday night broadcast that Jack Buck did for so long, and before him, Lindsey Nelson, and then doing, of course, doing the Super Bowl.
That is fantastic. And through all this busyness and everything else, you've really made a point of trying to have balance and raise your children. And you mentioned your wife, the angel in your life, but you made an extra effort. I've heard on more than a couple of occasions, maybe an itinerary that you put together, and I'd be like, well, if I had a game at Golden State on Tuesday and then I had a game in L.A. on Friday, I ain't coming home. But you would make those kind of sacrifices.
Yeah, when I was younger, when the kids were home, they're grown and gone now.
Right.
I've got 4 grandchildren, and they're all out of the house. And but the joy of our life has been raising the kids. But when they were going through school, sports or cheerleading, we had 3 daughters and a son, and of course he had a busy sports schedule, but they were all cheerleaders, and that was always a big thing. And I just remember that people always say that they may not say it at the time, but you being in the stands or whatever, and watching them doing what they're doing means so much. And so I just made it a point that I was not going to, if I didn't have a game that night, I was not going to miss any of their activities. And each one of them have said, it never was like you were gone, Dad. Like, you were at all my big things, graduation, you were at the games, you were at the, when I went to prom, you were there. Like, so knock on wood, it all kind of worked out. But there were a lot of times when I do a game and in between would fly home to watch them cheer and then leave the next day. Our one daughter was a homecoming queen, and I got to walk her out to center court, and then drove to the airport, and then flew to Nashville, and then drove to Athens and did a game at noon the next day, Kentucky and Georgia for CBS, and landed at 11 o'clock in Nashville and got my hotel room in Athens at about 5 a.m. and woke up at 8 and was at the arena by 9:30 and did the game at noon, and then went right back to the airport and flew home. Right. And was able to watch the dance that night because the crowning was Friday and the big dance was on Saturday. Wow. So that was, and then sometimes we would do our Friday interviews with the teams during the NFL season. I would fly in Friday morning to Cleveland or Pittsburgh or wherever, and then get an afternoon flight back to Kansas City, and then drive right to the stadium. Annie would be there, and we'd watch the girls cheerlead. They went to Shawnee Mission East and were varsity cheerleaders there for a couple of years, and so I got to watch. And they did it at the same time, which is really great. One was a senior, one was a junior, right. And so they got to cheerlead a lot of times the same game, and that was always easy. So easier, I should say. So then I'd leave Saturday morning, go back to that city, and we do the visiting team and do the game Sunday, and then I'd be off to the Monday game and then home. So, yeah. but it worked out, and a lot of dads do. Listen, a lot of parents make that effort. So there was nothing Herculean about it. It was just had to be, just had to really kind of think the schedule through and have no regrets about it, and felt like I really didn't miss much, although there were times that I wasn't there to help at homework on a Tuesday night or whatever. But right. but for the most part, I was there for the big events.
Well, you obviously, and now you've got a wedding coming up. You have grandchildren, and also another joy of your life as you work through what I guess we can consider the latter part of your career. Although I imagine you're going to work for quite a long time. Is that your daughter is in the industry? That's amazing, and you've actually shared games together.
We've done a lot of Monday night games together.